So we will start out by talking about emotions themselves. There are 4 points about emotions that we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about emotions being value-laden somatic experiences, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I'll encourage you guys to experience the full emotional spectrum, to develop a rich emotional vocabulary, and then lastly, we'll talk about the difference between judgments and emotions because people often get them confused. So let's start out by talking about what emotions are. So there actually is no scientific consensus on a definition for emotion. I think this really shows the shortcomings of psychology as a science, that there is this experience that is so fundamental to what it means to be a human, and it's so intuitive. We can all think about it and talk about it, and yet to scientifically define it is almost impossible. So I've come up with a few definitions that I've borrowed and made up on my own that I like. Feel free to come up with whatever definition works the best for you. The first definition I like is that emotions are value-laden somatic experiences. Let's break down that definition a little bit. Somatic just means in your body. It means physical. So by a somatic experience, I mean that you have a physical sensation that is associated with emotions. And value-laden just means that we think of it as good or bad. So a value-laden somatic experience means that we have emotions that we experience physically in our body, and we have a reaction to those feelings. They're either good feelings or bad feelings. The other definition I really like is that emotions are sensory perceptions of our social world. Just in the same way that our eye detects light waves and gives us information about our physical world, emotions are information about our social world, about how we're interacting with other people. So that's another really useful way to think about emotions. They give us information about our relationships with other people. There's also, you may have heard that there's like a fundamental number of emotions that are universal to all people. Again, there's a lot of argument about whether that's true and what they are and how many they are. Some psychologists feel that it's just two. That there are basically two emotions. You're either happy or sad, and everything is some variation of that. So fear, anger, those would all be part of the sadness, the bad emotions category. Happiness, joy, excitement would be part of the good emotional category, and that's it. It's one or the other. You're probably familiar with this structure that was used in Inside Out. This is actually a popular psychological theory that there are 5 basic emotions: sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and joy. Again, there's no consensus on this, so come up with your own idea about what are the fundamental emotions, and whatever seems right to you can be right for you. So that's what emotions are. They are value-laden somatic experiences. Next, I'm going to encourage you to experience the full emotional spectrum. We learn from a very young age that some emotions are good and that some emotions are bad. So when we're young, when we're smiling and we're laughing, we receive a lot of praise and attention for that. It's like we're a good child. When we're sad, when we're angry, when we cry and scream, we're told that's bad. We're a bad child, right? And because of that, we end up truncating our own emotional experience. We cut off certain emotions, the conscious experience of certain emotions, because we don't like that we have those. We don't like being angry with the people that we love. We don't like being scared. And so we cut those things off, and when we experience them, we don't really pay attention to it, and we don't like to admit experiencing those things. In Buddhism, they have this thing called the second arrow, and it comes from a story where the Buddha is talking to his disciples, and he says, "Hey guys, does it suck to get shot with an arrow?" And they're like, "Yeah, Buddha, that sucks." And he's like, "Well, does it suck more to get shot with 2 arrows?" And they were like, "Yeah, Buddha, that sucks even more." And he was like, "Well, why do you keep doing it to yourselves?" And what he meant by that is that we often have an emotional reaction that we cannot control, and then we get upset at ourselves for having that emotional reaction. Let me give you an example. When I was in grad school, I was applying for jobs at the same time as one of my best friends, and we were applying for the same job, so we were in direct competition with each other. And she got a call back for an interview before I did. And she's so excited and happy about this. And when she's telling me, and just the first thing I feel is envious. I just have this gut reaction of just pure envy where it's like, why did she get a call back and I didn't? And I wanted that, right? And then after the envy, I felt guilt that why was I feeling this way? This is one of my best friends. I should be happy for her. I shouldn't feel envious. So I feel guilty about that, right? And then, I get angry at myself for feeling guilty because it's like, well, I'm allowed to be a little bit envious. And what you do is you wind up with emotions built on emotions built on emotions. Whereas you could stop that right there and say, okay, I'm envious. That's a normal human reaction to this. I'm not going to act on it. I'm not going to sabotage her. But there's nothing wrong with being envious. That doesn't make me a bad person. I don't need to feel guilty for being envious. I don't need to be angry at myself for feeling guilty. And instead of building emotions on top of each other, we can just address the real emotion that's there, which is envy. But you have to be willing, you have to be open to experiencing the full spectrum of emotions to be able to do that. When you experience envy, you have to say, okay, this is part of the emotional experience of a human being. I'm not going to feel good or bad about having that emotional experience. Just like if you ate candy all day, every day, you would get sick of it, right? That we can't just always eat sweet. We want sour sometimes, or bitter, or spicy, that it is using the full palette of our taste that makes food enjoyable and delicious. Life is the same way, that if we try to stay in this always happy, always pleasant, emotional experience, that we're going to get bored of that, we're going to get sick of it. It's not healthy. In order to have this rich emotional life, we want the sweet parts, but we also need to be open to the bitter parts, the sour parts, the spicy parts. That's what's going to make our emotional life as rich and joyful as a good meal.